Some rivers you only cross on a bridge and never really meet. Here in St. Cloud, Minnesota, a modest city park lets you walk straight down to the water and stand with the Mississippi at your feet. This is Riverside Park, a long green shelf of old trees and quiet paths on the east bank of the Great River. It is one of the oldest parks in the city, and for well over a century people have come here simply to be near the water. Today we walk it end to end, under the tall trees along the current, through an early autumn afternoon. Come along and let the river set the pace. St. Cloud sits in the middle of Minnesota, where the Mississippi River swings north and then turns to run south toward the heart of the state. The city grew up on both banks, and it took the nickname the Granite City for the pale, hard stone quarried all around it. Riverside Park lies on the east side of the river, at the end of Killian Boulevard, directly across the water from St. Cloud State University. It is a narrow ribbon of parkland, pinned between a residential street and the riverbank itself. From almost anywhere in the park, you can see the water moving and hear it. That nearness to the river is the whole reason this place exists. The path leads us down toward the bank and the trees begin to open. Through the trunks, the river appears in flat, bright pieces, then all at once as a broad, moving sheet. On a September afternoon, the water is low and calm, carrying leaves and light downstream. The far shore is close enough to make out individual windows and rooftops. There is no rush here, no rapids, just the steady weight of a very large river going about its business. We follow the edge and let it lead. The Mississippi is the defining fact of this park, so it is worth remembering just how great it is. It runs more than 2,000 miles from northern Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico, draining a basin that reaches most of the way across the continent. It gathers water from 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces before it is done. Here at St. Cloud, we are still in its upper reaches, only a couple hundred miles from its source, and the river is already wide and strong. Everything downstream, all those thousands of miles, begins with water like this. To walk beside it here is to stand near the start of something enormous. For a stretch, the trail runs level and easy right along the top of the bank. The ground underfoot is soft with fallen leaves and packed earth. Roots lace across the path where old trees have gripped the slope for decades. Below us, the bank drops away to a fringe of grass and stone, then the water. It is the kind of walking that lets your mind wander while your feet take care of themselves. It is easy to forget that this powerful river starts as something you could step across. Its source is Lake Itasca, in the pine and birch country of northern Minnesota, where the water leaves the lake as a shallow, stony stream only a few feet wide. From there, it winds and gathers for hundreds of miles, pulled together by countless creeks and marshes. By the time it reaches St. Cloud, it has become the broad river we see today. Knowing where it begins gives the water in front of us a kind of history. We are watching the same river, only grown up. We stop for a moment where the bank gives a clear view up and down the river. The current here is smooth on the surface, but you can feel its power in the way it moves whole rafts of leaves along without effort. Little eddies turn near the shore, and the light breaks and scatters across the ripples. Somewhere out in the channel, the water runs deep and cold. This is the quiet muscle of the Mississippi, patient and unhurried. It has shaped this bank for far longer than the city has stood. St. Cloud grew up around a natural bend and a shallow, rocky stretch of the river. For centuries, that shallow ground made the river easier to cross here than in many places, drawing travelers and trade to this exact spot. The pale granite that surfaces along the banks is the same stone that gave the city its name and its early industry. So the river did not only bring beauty to this place, it decided where the city would be at all. Riverside Park sits on a small piece of that original riverfront. Standing here, we are on the ground that started everything. Riverside Park is among the oldest parks in St. Cloud, and it wears its age gracefully. For much of the city's history, this stretch of riverbank was simply where people came to gather. Long before the modern trails and picnic shelters, families walked here on Sunday afternoons and children played along the water. The park has carried different names over the years, but its purpose has stayed the same. It has always been the place where the city meets its river. That continuity is part of what makes it feel so settled. This peaceful bank was once a working riverfront. In the late 1800s, a sawmill stood just upstream, on the ground that is now the neighboring gardens. Cutting timber floated down the river. The mill was struck by lightning and burned, was rebuilt and burned again, and eventually the industry faded. As the mills and log yards gave way, the city began to see the riverbank differently, not as a place to work but as a place to rest. In 1915, the city took in this land as public parkland. The saws fell silent, and the park began. As we walk, low shelves of pale rock break through the grass near the water. This is the granite that made St. Cloud famous. For generations, quarries around the city cut this stone and shipped it across the country for buildings and monuments. The same durable rock lies beneath the park, showing itself wherever the soil is thin. It is a reminder that even in this soft green place, hard bedrock is never far below. The city and the park both stand on it. Part of the character of this riverfront was shaped in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Workers from the Works Progress Administration, a federal program that put unemployed people to work, improved the riverfront gardens next door. They built the first greenhouse, laid rock-lined paths, and set stone around a lily pond and fountain. Much of that careful handwork is still in place today, refurbished but faithful to the original. It is a kind of labor you can still touch. The stonework carries the fingerprints of a hard decade turned into something lasting. The influence of that era spills into how the whole riverfront feels. Paths are edged with fitted stone, steps are cut low and solid, and everything is built to last. You sense that the people who made these paths expected them to be walked for generations. There is nothing flashy about it, only good, patient craft. Walking here, you move at the pace those builders set. Solid ground, laid by hand, still doing its job. There is something moving about stonework that has outlived the hardship that made it. The rock-lined paths and low walls were built by people who badly needed the work, in one of the hardest stretches this country has known. Yet what they left behind is quiet and beautiful, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Moss softens the joints now, and leaves gather in the corners each fall. The stone does not announce itself. It simply holds. That is its own kind of dignity. Our path brushes the edge of the Riverside Gardens that grew out of this very park. Where the trail meets the manicured beds, the wild green of the riverbank gives way to tended flowers and clipped hedges. The two blend together at the seam, park and garden sharing the same shaded ground. It is an easy, natural transition, the kind you barely notice as you walk. For a few steps you have the best of both, the river on one side and the flowers on the other. The gardens beside us grew directly out of Riverside Park. Joseph Munsinger served as the city's first park superintendent, and his love of flowers led to the park department's first greenhouse on this ground. In the 1930s, the city set aside the flower part of Riverside Park and gave it his name. Today, Munsinger Gardens is famous across the region, a shaded riverbank planting of ferns, hostas, and towering trees. It is a public garden with no admission fee, open to anyone who wanders down to the river. The park and the garden are really two halves of one story. Back under the trees, the light goes soft and green. The canopy here is high and closed, held up by trunks that have been growing for many decades. Sound changes beneath big trees. The river murmur softens and the air feels cooler and still. Squirrels work the branches overhead, and now and then an acorn drops onto the path. It is the kind of shade that makes you slow down without deciding to. We keep walking, small beneath the old wood. Among the handmade features that survive from the 1930s is a stone-lined lily pond with a low fountain at its center. It was one of the earliest ornamental touches added to this riverbank, set among the trees where the ground stays cool and damp. In summer, the pads spread across the water, and the fountain keeps a soft, steady sound. By early autumn, the surface is scattered with fallen leaves. It is a small, deliberate bit of calm tucked into a place that is already calm. Little pools like this reward you for slowing down to look. There is a particular sound to this park in the fall. Dry leaves crunch underfoot, the river hisses faintly against the bank, and wind moves through branches that are just beginning to thin. Now and then a train sounds somewhere across the city, or a voice carries from the far shore. Mostly, though, it is soft. The park holds its quiet the way old places do. You find yourself listening more than looking. The great asset of this park is its trees. Tall hardwoods, many of them decades old, line the bank and arch over the paths. Elms, oaks, maples, and basswoods grow well in this rich river soil, their roots reaching down toward the water. Mature trees like these do quiet, essential work. They hold the bank against the current, shade the ground through hot summers, and shelter countless birds and animals. A park is only as grand as its oldest trees, and here they are grand indeed. Some of them have watched the river far longer than anyone now living. Early September brings the first hints of the turn. A few maples have begun to blush at their edges, and the light has taken on that low, golden slant that belongs to fall. The air is warm but no longer heavy, and the river carries a first thin drift of fallen leaves. It is the hinge of the year, summer letting go by degrees. Walking through it, you can feel the season leaning forward. In a few short weeks, this whole canopy will catch fire with color. Central Minnesota autumns run gold and amber and deep red, and a riverbank full of hardwoods is one of the best places to watch it happen. Oaks hold their bronze late into the season, while maples flare orange and scarlet almost overnight. The river doubles the display, carrying the color downstream and reflecting the rest. It is a brief, generous show, gone almost as soon as it arrives. We are catching it just as the first sparks appear. Every so often the path offers a bench set to face the water. These small overlooks are the heart of how the park is used. People come here to sit as much as to walk. A person could spend a whole afternoon on one of them, watching the light change on the current. The river never repeats itself, so the view is never quite the same twice. We pause at one, just long enough to take it in, then move on. It is worth pausing on the stone that runs beneath all of this. St. Cloud earned its nickname, the Granite City, from the quarries that opened here in the 1800s. The rock is exceptionally hard and takes a fine polish, which made it prized for courthouses, banks, and monuments far beyond Minnesota. That same granite forms the bedrock of the river gorge and surfaces along these banks. The river could not cut deeply through such stone, so it spread wide instead. In a real sense, the granite is why the river and the park look the way they do. The main path through the park is broad and welcoming, made for every kind of visitor. Walkers, runners, and families with strollers all share it, and in winter parts of it are groomed for cross-country skiing. The park also holds room for disc golf, tennis courts, a playground, and a splash pad for hot summer days. It is a genuine neighborhood park, well used and well loved, not a wilderness set apart. That everyday busyness is part of its charm. This is a place woven into the daily life of the city. Long before the city built swimming pools, this stretch of river was where St. Cloud came to cool off. On hot summer days, people waded and swam right here off the bank, and the city even posted lifeguards to watch over them. The river gave the pleasure of open water and at times its dangers too. Eventually pools were built and the swimming moved indoors, but the memory stayed. For generations of families, this bank was the neighborhood beach. The water still invites you, even if we only wade in with our eyes now. Past the shelters, the park opens into broad, easy lawn. This ground has hosted gatherings large and small for as long as anyone can remember, from family picnics to community celebrations. The picnic tables, grills, and pavilion make it an easy place to spend a whole day. On a weekend, the air here carries wood smoke and laughter. It is the social heart of the park, the counterpart to the quiet paths along the water. People have always come here to be together. The park does not close when the snow comes. It simply changes its games. For generations, the slope here has been a favorite sledding hill, and the groomed trails fill with cross-country skiers gliding between the bare trees. The river freezes at its edges, and the whole park goes silent under white. Where children swam in July, they toboggan in January. That turning of the seasons is part of how the park is loved. It gives something back in every month of the year. Our walk begins to curve back toward the water for a last long look. The afternoon light has gone lower and warmer, laying gold across the current. The trees throw long shadows down the bank, and the river keeps moving, indifferent and steady. We have gone from the working history of this ground to its quiet present, and it all comes back to the water. One more stretch of shaded path, and then the river again. Autumn may be the finest season on this riverbank. The crowds of summer have thinned, the light turns generous, and the trees begin their slow blaze. The river runs clear and low, carrying leaves like small boats toward the south. Everything about the place softens and slows in these weeks. It is a season made for exactly this kind of walk, unhurried and attentive. If you visit only once, come when the leaves are turning. We end where the park always points us, at the edge of the water. From a quiet overlook, the Mississippi spreads out, wide and patient on its long way to the Gulf. Behind us stand the old trees and the handmade stone. Before us, only the river and the far green shore. It is a modest view in a modest city park, and that is exactly its gift. You do not need grandeur to feel the pull of a great river. You only need a place that lets you stand close. Riverside Park is not a wilderness or a wonder of the world. It is something quieter and rarer, a city's front porch on a great river, kept open and green for well over 100 years. Here the Mississippi is not a line on a map, but a living thing you can walk beside, under trees that were old before we came. Sometimes the finest trails are the humble ones, close to home, close to the water. We hope this one drew you in as it drew us. Thank you for watching. Follow for more of the trails of the world.